There is a method that has been building fertile soil for millions of years. Glaciers used it to create the breadbasket regions of entire continents. In 1894, a German scientist figured out how to replicate it in months. His book was removed from libraries. He was labeled a charlatan. Over 80 years later, an American engineer tested it. His corn produced 65 bushels per acre. His neighbors, using chemical fertilizers, managed 25. Today, a $200 billion industry depends on you never learning their secret. The archive opens in 1894 in a small German mill town, where a chemist named Julius Hensel is about to make a discovery that will threaten the most powerful industry of the 20th century. Hensel was not supposed to be there. Born in 1833 in Kustrin, Germany, he had trained as a pharmacist before qualifying as a doctor of medicine. But he found himself drawn to something more fundamental than treating the sick. He wanted to understand why the sick became sick in the first place. His search led him to the soil. The story begins with an accident. Hensel was working at a mill, grinding grain, when he noticed that stones had become mixed with the wheat. Rather than discard the contaminated batch, he observed what happened when this stone-laced meal reached the fields. The plants that grew were different, denser, more vibrant. The pests that plagued neighboring crops left these alone. This accidental contamination became a deliberate investigation. Hensel analyzed the ash of entire plants, not just seeds as his rival Justus von Liebig had done. What he found upended the prevailing science. Phosphoric acid, which Liebig claimed was essential, accounted for only 1/10 of a plant's mineral composition. The other 90% was a complex symphony: calcium, magnesium, silica, iron, and dozens of trace elements that no one was measuring. In 1882, he published Macrobiotic, establishing his theory that mineral deficiency was the underlying cause of disease in plants, animals, and humans alike. Then came his masterwork. In 1894, Hensel published Bread from Stones, a new and rational system of land fertilization and physical regeneration. The Library of Congress still holds a copy. The title was not metaphor. He had discovered that finely ground rock, what he called stone meal or Steinmehl, could feed plants the full spectrum of minerals that life requires. His philosophy was simple but radical. The chemistry of life is determined by the chemistry of the soil. He called it macrobiology. And he had discovered something even more profound. The most fertile soils on Earth, the lost deposits of China, the black earth of Eastern Europe, the breadbasket regions of North America, were not accidents of geography. They were the product of glaciers. For millions of years, ice sheets had been grinding mountains into mineral-rich dust, distributing it across continents through wind and water. Hensel had figured out how to replicate in months what nature accomplished in eons. He called it stone meal. The world would call it rock dust. And within a decade, powerful forces would ensure you had never heard of either. The book should have changed everything. It did not. Hensel died around 1903. His work was largely forgotten. His stone meal was dismissed as the fantasy of a man who did not understand modern chemistry. The emerging fertilizer industry had no use for a product that could not be patented, that did not require annual purchase, that threatened to make their factories obsolete. For nearly 80 years, Bread from Stones gathered dust on the shelves of the few libraries that still held it. Then a mechanical engineer in Michigan picked it up. John Hamaker was born in 1914 in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from Purdue University with a degree in mechanical engineering. He was not a farmer. He was not an agronomist. He was a man who solved problems by understanding systems. In the 1960s, Hamaker turned his engineer's mind to a troubling pattern. Forests were dying. Crops were weakening. Climate was destabilizing. He began searching for the common thread. He found Hensel. Reading Bread from Stones, Hamaker recognized that the German chemist had uncovered something fundamental. Glacial cycles do not just shape continents, they renew Earth's soil. Every ice age grinds mountains into mineral-rich dust that blows across the planet, creating the conditions for explosive biological productivity. Between ice ages, soils slowly demineralize, crops weaken. The forests that depend on minerals begin to fail. In 1976, Hamaker decided to test the theory himself. He spread rock dust across a portion of his 10-acre farm in Michigan. He left the rest untreated as a control. He was an engineer, so he documented everything with mechanical precision. The following year, his corn produced 65 bushels per acre. Neighboring farms using chemical fertilizers produced under 25 bushels per acre. His corn tested higher in mineral content across the board. The treated sections showed virtually no pest damage. Meanwhile, aphids devastated the chemically fertilized fields nearby. He calculated that if American agriculture adopted remineralization, it could produce 4 times as much food, or the same amount with a 25% reduction in cost, without pesticides, without synthetic fertilizers. Hamaker understood what Hensel had understood. Chemical fertilizers are like steroids. They force rapid, watery growth while starving the plant of essential minerals. The resulting crops are large but weak, vulnerable. They require pesticides because they cannot defend themselves. Rock dust feeds the entire plant and the entire soil microbiome, the full spectrum of minerals that life requires. In 1982, John Hamaker published The Survival of Civilization with ecologist Donald Weaver. The book attracted attention that Hensel never received. Buckminster Fuller, inventor of the geodesic dome and professor emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania, said he had received and read John Hamaker's The Survival of Civilization, and that Hamaker's theory is a major contribution to humanity. Professor Kenneth Watt of the Evolution and Ecology Department at the University of California, Davis, declared that John Hamaker had developed a beautiful and comprehensive theory of climate change, every element of which is supported by scientific evidence. Hensel's book had been buried for nearly a century, but Hamaker's work reached readers, and what modern science would eventually confirm about rock dust should have rewritten agriculture. Instead, it was ignored. The question that should have been asked was simple: is our food still food? In 2004, Donald Davis at the University of Texas at Austin decided to find out. He obtained United States Department of Agriculture nutritional data from 1950 and compared it to data from 1999 for 43 vegetables and fruits, from asparagus to watermelon, from broccoli to tomatoes. What Davis found should have triggered a national emergency. Across all 43 crops, nutrient content had declined systematically. Protein was down 6%, calcium had dropped 16%, iron had fallen 15%, vitamin C had declined 15%, and riboflavin, vitamin B2, had plummeted 38%. Scientific American later reported the cause. Efforts to breed new varieties of crops that provide greater yield, pest resistance, and climate adaptability have allowed crops to grow bigger and more rapidly. But their ability to manufacture or uptake nutrients has not kept pace with their rapid growth. The plants were larger. They were emptier. A study in the United Kingdom examining mineral content between 1940 and 2019 found even starker declines. Sodium was down 52%, iron was down 50%, and copper was down 49%. The Cauchy Institute analyzed 12 fresh vegetables between 1975 and 1997 and documented a 37% decline in iron. But identifying the problem is not the same as solving it. In 2020, Mike Calland and his team at the Leverhulme Centre for Climate Change Mitigation at the University of Sheffield did what Hensel had done over a century earlier, with modern measurement tools and institutional rigour. They amended agricultural soil in the United Kingdom with crushed basalt rock at 10 kilograms per square metre. They planted sorghum, an important cereal crop, and they waited. The yield increased by 21%. No toxic trace elements accumulated in the seeds. The plants absorbed 26% more silicon, strengthening their stems and improving resistance to pests and disease. The study, published in Global Change Biology, documented something Hensel could only have dreamed of measuring. Then came the discovery that should have changed the conversation entirely. A single application of basalt could sequester 2 to 4 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare over 1 to 5 years, while simultaneously improving crop yields. Rock dust was not just fertilizer. It was doing what the agrochemical industry claims requires: separate, expensive, patented products. Feeding plants, building soil health, capturing atmospheric carbon, and reducing pest pressure. One application, multiple benefits. No patents, no annual purchases, no dependency. David Beerling, director of the Leverhulme Centre and recipient of a £10 million research grant from the Leverhulme Trust, led the program that produced these findings. His teams now operate field sites across 3 continents, the UK, the USA, and Australia, testing enhanced weathering on diverse agricultural ecosystems. His conclusion was measured but significant. These results from controlled environment studies are an important first step towards understanding how a carbon dioxide removal strategy called enhanced weathering might work with basalt. In any other industry, this would be called revolutionary efficiency. In the fertilizer industry, it is called a threat. The science was clear in 1894. It was confirmed in 1976. It was validated again in 2020. So why is rock dust not the foundation of modern agriculture? The answer is not scientific. It is economic. The campaign began before the book was even published. On February 14, 1893, Mr. Schultz-Lupitz, chairman of the Committee on Fertilizers, formally objected to Hensel's work. Professor Dr. Wagner, a well-known agricultural authority, labeled him a charlatan. The dismissals were public and coordinated. Contemporary accounts tell what happened next. Hensel's enemies succeeded in suppressing the further publication of this book and in removing it from libraries, until it became extremely rare and difficult to obtain. An extensive campaign was launched to impugn his research. The man who had figured out how to mimic the planet's own soil-building mechanism died in approximately 1903. His discovery was buried with him. But the burial was not enough. To truly ensure that rock dust would never threaten the emerging agricultural order, something had to replace it. In 1908, German chemist Fritz Haber filed a patent for synthesizing ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen. In 1913, Carl Bosch scaled the process to industrial production at the BASF plant in Ludwigshafen, Oppau. Within a year, the plant was producing 30 tons of synthetic ammonia per day. By 1918, Germany was manufacturing 200,000 tons annually for fertilizers and for explosives. Fritz Haber received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1918. He is also known as the father of chemical warfare, having developed the chlorine and phosgene gases that killed thousands in World War I. His wife, Clara Immerwahr, herself a chemist, committed suicide in protest of his weapons work. The same process that synthesizes fertilizer synthesizes the precursors to bombs. But the money was in fertilizer. Today, the global fertilizer market is valued at over $200 billion annually. Nitrogen-based fertilizers alone support approximately 40% of the world's food production. The industry is dominated by corporate giants: Nutrien Limited, CF Industries Holdings Inc., Yara International, the Mosaic Company, Israel Chemicals Limited. The market is projected to reach $277 billion by 2034. The entire system depends on one thing: annual repeat purchases. Rock dust cannot be patented. You cannot patent a volcano. You cannot patent a glacier. One application lasts not one season, but decades. German forestry research documented that a single treatment produced 4 times the wood volume after 24 years, with effects persisting for 60 years or more. There is no recurring revenue in remineralization. There is no dependency to exploit. They labeled the scientist who discovered it a charlatan. They removed his book from libraries until it became nearly impossible to find. They built an industry that requires you to purchase their products every single year. They created fertilizers that force rapid, watery growth while stripping minerals from soil, ensuring that next year you will need even more of their products. They made food that looks abundant but is nutritionally hollow. The organization Remineralize. The Earth calculates that you would need to eat 5 apples today to get the nutrition your grandparents got from 1. They sell you nitrogen that runs off into rivers and creates dead zones in oceans. They sell you phosphorus mined from deposits that will be exhausted within decades. They sell you potassium and call it complete nutrition, when it is only 3 elements of the 100 that plants actually require. They built a $200 billion industry on the suppression of a truth that was proven in 1894. But you cannot bury knowledge forever. In the early 1980s, a woman in Massachusetts picked up a copy of John Hamaker's The Survival of Civilization. Her name was Joanna Campi. What had previously been dirt under her feet became, she later described, a vast micro-universe that is the basis of all life. She started a newsletter in 1986. It became a magazine called Remineralize the Earth in 1991. In 1995, she incorporated it as a non-profit organization, headquartered in Northampton, Massachusetts. Today, Remineralize the Earth partners with the University of Brasilia, collaborates with the University of Massachusetts on biochar and rock dust research, and has helped launch remineralization projects in Costa Rica, Panama, Cameroon, Senegal, and Brazil. The movement Campe helped build is no longer on the margins. In Brazil, they call it Rochaam. The first national conference was held in 2009. The 5th will convene in 2025 in Piracicaba. Researchers from Embrapa, the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, and the University of Brasilia are documenting what happens when depleted tropical soils meet volcanic rock dust. In the UK, a startup called Undo Carbon is scaling what Hensel discovered to industrial levels. They have spread 399,000 tons of basalt across 27,000 hectares of British farmland. At least 63,000 tons of carbon dioxide have been removed from the atmosphere. 339 farms are now participating. Their partners include Microsoft, which selected Undo as its first enhanced rock weathering supplier, Stripe the payment platform, and the McLaren racing team. Undo was nominated for Prince William's Earthshot Prize and won the X Prize Carbon Removal Award, $5 million for demonstrating scalable carbon capture. Farmers are noticing what Hamaker noticed in Michigan. One Canadian farmer, who has been applying wollastonite, a calcium silicate rock, for 8 years, described the results. I have been applying wollastonite for 8 years, and my fields keep getting better. I get less lodging, and my crops grade higher. Yields are up overall, and the crops seem to handle the weather extremes better. Undo reports that participating farms have seen crop yield increases of up to 19%. David Beerling's team at Sheffield is testing enhanced weathering on cornfields in Illinois, in collaboration with the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. In February 2025, they published new findings in Nature under the title Transforming U.S. Agriculture for Carbon Removal with Enhanced Weathering. The method that was buried for a century is being unearthed, not by the agricultural corporations that profit from its suppression, but by scientists, non-profits, and farmers who discovered that the old knowledge was right. In the scientific literature, they call it enhanced rock weathering now. It sounds modern, it sounds technical, but it is what Julius Hensel discovered grinding grain in a German mill in 1894. The question is no longer whether rock dust works. The question is whether you will use it. Rock dust is not a single product. It is any finely ground silicate rock, most commonly basalt, volcanic, dark gray to black, fine-grained or granite, the primordial speckled rock of mountain cores. Glacial rock dust is mixed in composition, the product of ancient grinding that Hensel sought to replicate. Wollastonite is a calcium silicate, white to gray, particularly effective for raising soil pH. You can find it in places the industry prefers you do not look, quarry. Byproducts are often available as mining waste, basalt fines that have no commercial value to the aggregate industry, but contain precisely the minerals your soil is missing. Commercial products like azomite and various glacial rock dusts are available through garden suppliers. Organizations like Remineralize the Earth maintain networks of sources. In the UK, the USA, Canada, and Australia, Undo is actively working with farmers. Application is straightforward. Studies use rates from 4 to 50 tons per hectare, roughly 8 to 100 pounds per 100 square feet for a home garden. You spread it using standard equipment or by hand. It can be combined with compost or biochar for enhanced effect. One application provides benefits lasting years to decades as the rock slowly weathers and releases minerals into the soil. There are cautions. Different rocks have different compositions. Some contain trace metals you do not want in your garden. Test your source or buy from reputable suppliers who provide mineral analyses. High application rates will raise soil pH, which is beneficial for acidic soils and potentially problematic for alkaline ones. Transportation costs can be significant if you are not sourcing locally. Results vary by climate, soil type, and rainfall, and warmer and wetter conditions accelerate the weathering that releases minerals. But the fundamental truth remains what it was in 1894. For over 130 years, you have been told that agriculture requires annual purchases of synthetic chemicals, nitrogen synthesized by the same process that made World War I explosives possible, phosphorus mined from finite deposits, potassium isolated from the complex mineral matrix where it naturally belongs. You have been told this is science. It is commerce. The real science was published in 1894 by a German chemist they called a charlatan. It was confirmed in 1976 by an American engineer they ignored. It was validated again in 2020 by researchers at one of the world's leading universities. Rock dust feeds plants the way glaciers have fed soil for millions of years. It contains not 3 elements, but up to 100. It cannot be patented. It does not require annual purchase. It builds soil rather than depleting it. It captures carbon rather than releasing it. They buried the book. They smeared the scientist. They built a $200 billion industry on making you forget. Now you know. Every handful of rock dust you spread is an act of remembering. Every garden you remineralize is proof that what was suppressed can be recovered. The knowledge that systems tried to bury is yours now. Use it